Lured to Portugal by a tart. Picture a not-so-Portuguese steely cold November day, full of rain and reflections. I'm in the ancient English city of Worcester, splashing through the medieval side streets, where people are passing by, heavily wrapped in winter garments. As they walk, these bundles intensely angle themselves forward to fight the driving wind. The rain is near horizontal, and a gale forces its way past my carefully contrived layers of clothing. Despite this insulation, I feel trickles of icy water shocking my skin. I wipe the rain from my eyes, lick my lips for what seems the 100th time today, and try not to remind myself that they are sorely cracked and chapped. The thought of escaping this meteorologically inflicted torture crosses my mind. Squeezing my sodden and slitted eyes, I scan the vicinity for some kind of respite, a haven to hold up in, while the winter inflicts its worst. My gaze finally fixes on what appears to be a new cafe in town. As the stair rods of rain beat the cobbles, I dance and jump to avoid the deep puddles of overspill, which loiter, waiting to run off into drains. A bell pings as I go inside, and a wave of welcoming heat, sounds of huddled conversation, and a warm light greet my entrance. Not being here before, I take a little time to drip and organize myself to the new surroundings. Stretching before me is a long, cheerfully lit counter with pastries and various savoury fare. To the right are about 6 or 7 tables with what seem to be local immigrant Portuguese farm workers chatting and drinking coffee. I spend a few seconds more to acclimatise, then realise the waiting staff seem Portuguese too. The smell of coffee and cinnamon fill my nostrils. The allure of this aroma takes me to the counter. I am at the point of shivering, but find myself beginning to feel a little more alive, thanks to the warmth and heat of ovens, grills and boilers. My attention is grabbed, and my eye falls upon a collection of small custard-like, ambered-coloured tarts, which seem agreeable. I order one and a coffee with plenty of milk and find a place to sit by the window. I watch the bluish late afternoon light begin to look like night. So I give thanks that I'm comfortable, dry and cloistered, away from it all. I look down at the unfamiliar form of a custard tart in my hand. It warmly reminds me of the ones my nan used to buy me as a kid. Long, long ago in a scullery far, far away, she would deposit 4 or 5 for the family, and I always managed to get a slice of the action. This tart, though, was different. It was lighter, crispier, buttery, and a little smaller. I held it in front of me, analysing it. To be fair, although different, it looked good. I bit it, like a shark, taking half away in one aggressive, decisive chomp. I rolled the bitten part around my mouth a while. A kind of creamy, vanilla-like taste came through, and spicy cinnamon elements started to show themselves. It was a custard, but less gelatinous than the ones Nan supplied. Somehow smoother, somehow more tasty. As I sat there, a lonely figure dressing a cafe window, I had little idea of what had just happened. How could I? How do we ever figure out when passions or fascinations hatch in the depths of the subconscious? I had no idea what had just been formed was a connection with a land of sunshine, light and heat and subtropical verdant greenery. From the depth of a profoundly sullen English winter's afternoon, I wondered about the origins of this pastry. Over 1,600 kilometres to the south, or 1,000 miles in old money, more than 300 years ago, people were delighting and deliberating over the same taste. This natty little custard tart was cooking up its own popularity in a big way then. At the toe end of Western Europe sits the warm and breezy land of Portugal. This place, for centuries, has been the home of the small treat the population call pastel de nata. Its origins are stiff, religious and holy. The stiffness element came in the form of egg whites, because back in the day they were used to starch freshly laundered clothing and religious dress. The byproduct of all this was a surplus of egg yolks. Necessity, being the mother of invention, took a hand, and the monks in the Hieronymus monastery in Lisbon spied an opportunity. They craftily set about using these waste yolks in the production of a secret pastry recipe. The product became known as pastéis de nata, and the income from the sales bolstered financial support for the monastery. The battle to save the building eventually faltered later, and it closed in 1834, but the recipe lived on. It was sold to the owners of the Fábrica de Pastéis de Belém, which opened in 1837. Today, this is still the most popular place to buy these treats around the Lisbon area. Known simply as Pastéis de Belém, the shop is a short 3-minute jaunt from the Hieronymus monastery. There's both a takeaway and eat-in service. This is very popular, so remember, if you ever take the fancy to visit, bring a sprinkle of patience with you, because there's always a queue stretching out the door. Make no mistake, this little tart is a big tourist attraction. People from all over the world salivate at the sight of a cross between custard tart and a cake. The allure stems from the outside, which is crispy and flaky, while the inside is creamy, soft and sweet. I think the taste is not far from that of a cakey creme brulee. You can find a pastel de nata or two in most cafes up and down the country, and they are available all over Portugal. Each region has its own take on the tart because the original recipe is still kept secret. But this has not stopped these pastries becoming synonymous with Portugal and Portuguese cafe life. There are many times I think back to that cold, rainy November day, especially now when I sit down among the summer throngs in a Portuguese bar or cafe. I still love the little pastry which I quietly consumed long ago in that English medieval city eatery. Back then I didn't realize that in the following months I would be a regular visitor to that Portuguese-owned establishment. Nor did I know how the little tart would light the fire of desiring me to live a very different and eventful future life in my Portuguese place in the sun.